Are you a reader looking for a good book? Or are you an author who has written a book? Good Books Online is the show that brings readers and authors together.
Welcome to another episode of Good Books Online. Today I have with me Tom Ball, who has written The Soapbox Man. And talk about something that's timely, Tom. I mean, right now you've got all the news agog about the current presidential election, and this thing has a lot of politics going all through it. Why don't you give our listeners a little rundown of how the book gets started?
The Soapbox Man takes place about 15 years ago in the city of Boston, but as you said, it could be taking place today. There's a lot of things that happen throughout the book that are happening in our cities today.
Absolutely.
We have the city's new mayor, Simon Hatch, has just come to power, and his family has a history of being very social Darwinistic, if you were, and they are very intensely competitive, and they bring that to all aspects of their lives. And
in fact,
as mayor, he wants to try to eliminate some of the people that are causing problems in their city, that are causing drains on the city, like the homeless and the gangs and the criminals and things like that.
Right. But let's talk about the opening chapter, because the opening chapter is almost like a cliffhanger, isn't it?
It is. The opening chapter and the final chapter are actually bookends that take place about 20 years before the entire book. Well, the first part, the opening takes place 20 years later. The last chapter wraps up what happened in that 20-year span.
Right. But let's do the opening. Let's just do the opening just to kind of bring people into the book. How does the book start?
The book starts with a policeman who is suspicious of the way that the current mayor is doing business, and he approaches him, and
it's kind of a shakedown, isn't it?
What's that?
It's supposed to be a shakedown, right?
Yeah, he goes in as a shakedown, although that's not really what his personality is. But the police officer is dying very slowly and going to die very soon of lung cancer.
Right.
And he sees this shakedown of the mayor as the only way that he can raise the money necessary to be able to put his young 7-year-old daughter through school.
Okay.
So he goes down and he tries to extort some money from the mayor and from his family. And
doesn't work out too well, does it?
Not successful at it. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. In fact, he ends up getting shot, doesn't he?
He ends up getting shot. Yes, he does. And when that chapter closes, you don't know exactly what happened until you read through the first couple chapters of the book that's more up to date.
Right.
And you hear his daughter referring back to what happened to her father, having died under mysterious circumstances.
Right. Yeah.
And his daughter is actually one of the main characters of the book.
Okay. So once you get through the little cliffhanger there, tell them how the book starts from that point on.
The book starts with where we are introduced slowly to a multitude of characters.
Yeah.
You don't really understand the links between the characters until you get a good bit into the book.
Yeah. In fact, there's kind of like
completely different personalities and people, and you can't possibly imagine how they could be related.
Yeah. Well, I mean, in fact, the funny thing is, it's kind of like the mayor kind of decides to stage a little bit of a press event, because he's going to go out and he's going to to take care of some of these street people, and one of the people that he approaches ends up being killed very shortly thereafter. Isn't that right?
Well, she ends up he goes out at a promotional event to help the homeless and get them to shelters.
Right.
But it's really just staged for the press.
Absolutely.
And the woman doesn't actually end up in a shelter.
In fact, she ends up dead.
Freezing to death that
Yeah,
night.
exactly. But then what happens is that one of the other street people, of course, figures that, hey, there's an opportunity here, kind of rifles through her belongings, and what happens? He ends up hitting the jackpot.
He finds that she's been hoarding money.
All right.
And a good bit of money, enough to get him off the street for a while. And that's actually how he ends up getting linked into this, because he ends up being at a hotel where he obviously, as a homeless person, wouldn't normally be, when some of the other later events of the book start happening.
Well, clue us in a little bit. Just give us, because again, right now we're just trying to set the stage, whet the reader's appetite, so they're going to want to read some more. So tell us what happens to the street person.
Well, he ends up finding a little purse that the other woman who died
Right.
had, and it's got about $2,300 in it. And he thinks of this as he could do one of two things. He can either just go nutty and spend the money
Right.
and have a great time with it, or he can use that as a way to get himself off the street.
Mm-hmm.
So he decides to take one night in a hotel, buy some of his favorite things, some good alcohol, and
Right.
and end up in he ends up going to a rather cheap hotel where he gets scared off by another homeless person
Yeah.
that he thinks is trying to rob him, and he ends up in a really nice hotel, and that's where he encounters some of the other people that are integral to the story later on.
Right. Yeah, and also what's interesting about the story, like I said, you've got the political element, you've got the the grit of the city with the street people, but you've also got some street gangs in there. Tell the readers a little bit about the Dragoons.
Okay, they're a street gang that are structured different than most street gangs. They're very well organized. They only fight when they need to fight. They
Right.
run as many drug corners as they possibly can. They're there to make money, at least from the people at the top of the gang. The younger people in the gang that join for other reasons, some of them join for the sole purpose of fighting and doing bad things on the street and stuff, and they're not so thrilled with just being a money-making machine.
Right.
And one of the things that the mayor is trying to do in terms of his social Darwinistic tendencies is he wants to get these gangs fighting with each other,
Right.
as he says, and please, these aren't my words, these are the mayor's words, to try to kill off as many of these kids before they reproduce as possible.
Right. Right. And they don't have to push too hard because the gang members are not exactly friendly toward each other either. Right. I mean, there's quite a lot of
they're not.
infighting going on.
No, they're not. And actually, one of the gang members is one of the people that finds out a clue to what the mayor's doing, and he inadvertently passes it on to another character who we haven't even talked about yet.
Mm-hmm.
And so we really end up with three people that have a clue to what the mayor's doing to instigate these gang wars. And they're sort of, because of other circumstances, they're running from each other and towards each other at the same time.
Oh yeah.
They need each other, but they don't really. But they don't know it. They don't know that the other person has a
Right.
piece that'll help them put the puzzle together.
Right, and of course, the mayor has all the support of the police department and the chief of police and everything else. So it's a pretty interesting little plot. How did you come up with this, Tom? I mean, what was the spark of inspiration that got you writing this particular story?
I think that the genesis of it came from. Kind of weird to say this, but it came from a couple of songs that I used to listen to on an album years ago.
Right.
And they were two of them that were consecutive on the album. And one of them put the idea of some of the characters in my head, and the other song put the idea of the setting of the city
Right.
in my head. And then from listening to it so many times, they all just started to meld together into a story.
Okay. How long did it take you to write the Soapbox Man?
Well, it's kind of embarrassing, but probably about 15 years.
That's all right. I mean, I've written two novels myself. One of them took me 6 years. The second one took me 6 months. And I still got some in my head right now that have been in my head for 10, 12 years. I haven't put on paper yet, so that's not unusual.
Yeah, I'm exactly the same way. I
Yeah.
have on note cards the beginnings of probably 10 or 12 additional books that I'd like to write.
Right.
Just don't always have the time to do it.
Oh yeah, but you know what it's like. I mean, sooner or later, those characters just kind of grab you by the throat and say, "You will write about me."
Yes. Actually, what I found happens occasionally is that characters that you think that are in one story end up in a different story.
I
End up
agree with
moving
you
to the other
100%.
story.
Yep. In fact, the same thing is with my stories. That's not unusual because you get kind of comfortable with the character sets too. So that
Exactly.
helps. You get
Exactly. And,
yeah.
I've read a lot of books on how to write a book.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people say to write out an outline the entire thing before
Right.
you get started.
Yeah.
And to me, that just is impossible.
Right.
Because I can't stick with the outline I've heard other writers say this, and I didn't believe it till it happened to me, but you can actually write a piece of dialogue or something that the character does
Right.
that you weren't expecting,
Oh,
and
yeah.
it takes you off a completely different direction.
In fact, that's when you know that the story is really working, when the characters start telling you the story.
Exactly, exactly. So I don't understand how these people write out outlines from beginning to end and stick to it.
Yeah. Well, I think
Because
everybody
those-
kind of has their own method of doing it, Tom. Because
Yeah.
I'm kind of like, I have a foot in either camp, because I'll usually have some landmarks in the story, but I won't know the entire story. And like I said, the characters actually have to kind of tell me as we go along, and other characters will pop in that I had no intention of putting in the story. They just show up.
Right, right. And I think the only reason that I would ever use an outline or even have one
Right.
is to avoid painting myself into a corner.
Mm-hmm.
And I've read some books that I thought were really good books until I got to the point where some miracle has to happen in order to get the character out of some situation,
Right.
because the author hadn't planned on it.
Yeah, he painted himself into a
Hadn't
corner.
planned an exit strategy.
Yeah. You can paint yourself into a corner with prose very easily.
Exactly, exactly.
So did any of that happen to you in Soapbox Man? Did you get stuck?
Yes, it did.
Yeah.
It did. The book right now is about 250 pages,
Mhm.
and I probably threw away 150 pages as I wrote.
Right.
Not that I had 400 pages at any given time,
Right.
but I had whole chapters and whole sections that ended up getting thrown out because they took me off in a direction that I ultimately didn't want to go.
Yeah, you can get that led down a blind alley, and then you realize, okay, I can't get there from here.
Exactly. There's no way I'm getting back to the storyline if I keep going down this way. And it's painful. It's
Oh, yeah.
very painful.
Yeah.
But
Because like when I wrote my last novel, I actually had a few areas where I kind of hit a bump in the road, and instead of sitting there and trying to get over that bump in the road, I just jumped ahead a couple of chapters and came back and fill, and it worked like a charm. And same thing,
I can try that.
I ended up with a lot of extra material. Some of it ended up on the cutting room floor, but it finally did get the story finished.
Oh, okay, that's a good idea. I'll think about that.
Yeah. So is this your first novel?
This is my first novel, yes. Before that, I've done some short stories and some academic research and a little bit of ghostwriting, but this is the first full project that I've ever done.
Okay. Are you planning on another book?
Yes. Yeah, I'm about a third of the way through another one that will either be a single book or a trilogy. It's about a third of the way through the first book.
Okay.
Sort of a young adult kind of thing.
Okay. But it has nothing to do with, doesn't continue where the Soapbox Man leaves off.
No, it doesn't.
Okay.
I had thoughts of continuing
Right.
some of the characters from the Soapbox
Right.
Man, but I felt it was a little forced and a little contrived,
Uh-huh.
and I couldn't really get where I wanted to with it, but it's not off the table.
You never know. Like you said, down the road, the characters might come back to you and force you to write another story about them.
Well, I hate to give away too much of the book, but a lot of the characters don't make it to the end.
Right, I know. That's why I didn't want to get too far into it either. But that's what makes the book interesting, you know.
Yeah.
In fact, you kind of set the stage for that in the early parts of the Soapbox Man, because you're putting a lot of them in peril, and you know right away that they're not all going to live to see the end of the story.
Right. And one of the criticisms that I've gotten from people is that there's too many characters at the beginning. And people don't usually tell me that after they've read the entire book. They only tell me that when they read it, when
Right.
they've only read the beginning.
Yeah.
And I say, just be patient, just be patient. You won't have so many characters to deal with
Right.
pretty soon.
Natural
So I've
selection
actually
will
had people come
prevail.
up to me and hit me because some of their favorite characters didn't make it.
Yeah.
And they're upset about that.
Well, hey, at least you know they read the book. I mean, that's,
Yeah.
feedback is always a good thing, good, bad, or indifferent. At least you know they've read the book.
Yeah. And I've gotten nothing but positive reviews of people that have read it, but you only have so many family and friends
Yeah.
and such that, and it's hard for somebody like me who doesn't know how to do the marketing and doesn't know how to get the word out there
Well,
to do anything other than
Yeah.
a web page or a Facebook page or something for it.
Well, funny you should say that, but that's what Good Books Online is all about, helping authors get
That's
the
why
word
I'm
out.
excited to be working with you. I appreciate
Well,
what
this is
you're
just
trying
a
to do.
start, Tom. This is just a start. And I just want to let our listeners at home know that you can find the Soapbox Man on Amazon, but you can also find it at Good Books Online. What's nice about Good Books Online is we have it set up so that you can have sample chapters, point click, you're reading it, you don't have to wait for something to download. You'll also be able to read a bio of Tom, and you'll be able to get some of the backstory. And of course, once I get this episode produced, this will also be on there as well. So we're almost out of time for the episode. Believe it or not, 15 minutes has elapsed. Again, I invite you also, Tom, to do a guest blog, because that's another way that you can interface with our readers. And thank you again for humoring me and coming on our little show.
I appreciate you inviting me. Thank you very much.
All right, and folks out there, we'll have other good books in upcoming episodes, so keep reading good books. See you next week.